Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about how you can improve your form in your handstand. So essentially how to get a better line. So if you want to learn how to look prettier while you're upside down, keep watching. What we're going to do is we're going to look through a few clips from my latest training and look at everything I'm doing right, everything I'm doing wrong, and how I can go about fixing the problems that we see. Let's have a look at the first clip. Okay, so here's the first clip. This is one of the warm-up sets from before I'm doing handstand push-ups. So this is a fairly accurate look at how my handstands look when I'm fresh. So I'm not necessarily judging the press, I'm mostly trying to look for good and bad form here, but it was really interesting to see that my hip sank towards my left shoulder on the way up. So that implies a couple of things, but mainly I was probably not pushing into the floor as much with my left shoulder as I was with my right shoulder. So my left shoulder was sinking slightly, which caused a bit of imbalance. So my weight shifted towards my left shoulder and I did a weird little... And the first thing that happens is I fumble around and I do a little bit of piking at the hips. So this isn't necessarily really bad. It's not the most common problem that you see with people in their handstands. More often you'll see what everyone refers to as a banana handstand. Personally, I would prefer to see that someone was piking rather than bananaing, unless obviously you're working towards something like a Mexican handstand or hollow back handstand where that's the goal. I had to pike a little bit here to catch my balance, and I think that is mostly because I came up a little bit too fast from my press, and again, not pushing quite tall enough through my shoulders. But I did catch it pretty quickly, and you can see where I go into nice line, and there's a split second where I clearly remember that I'm not squeezing my glutes, and you can just see a nice little tense of the glutes. Not really necessary to tense your glutes, everyone says to, but it's sort of something that you can choose whether or not you want to do. Pretty quickly here I get into something that looks like a pretty good handstand, but I don't live there long. I quite quickly fall back into a bit of a pike. But I'll pause it here, so after I've caught that balance, after I've caught the balance after the straddle, and line's looking pretty good. So legs are nice and straight, my glutes are tensed, toes fairly pointed. I would like a little bit more point at my toes, but not too bad. I think a lot of people would see this and go, pretty damn good handstand, I don't see any issues. But the main thing is, again, the main thing I've already been saying this whole way through, I'm not pushing through my shoulders enough. And finally, we've got a clip from a different day. In this one, I am working on some side bends. So right before I start side bending, you see I pull down my right leg. And that is once again because my weight is shifting slightly towards my left hand side. So what I'm learning here is that my left shoulder is probably a fair bit weaker than my right, and it's probably just not something that I've worked on a huge amount, and I need to pay a lot more attention to it. I think a lot of people would argue that my arms, my hands are too far apart. As a general rule, you want to aim for your hands shoulder width apart if you want the most efficient form possible. So strictly speaking, try and have your hands closer together than mine are. But if, like me, it's more comfortable for you to have your hands further apart, obviously don't go too crazy, but if hands slightly outside of shoulder width is more comfortable to you, do that. It's more important that you learn a sensation of balance and you get good at actually holding a handstand first, and then you can work on really refining things like that later on. The actual side bends, by the way, aren't bad. I'm quite happy with them. Obviously, I'd like to get a little bit deeper. I'd like to have a little bit more control. I think it's fairly clear that I hadn't done these in quite a long time, but for the most part, I think they're pretty decent. Also, you may, well, more clearly, you can see how hypermobile my elbows are here. If your elbows are hypermobile, don't worry about it. Just be careful. If you get joint pain, rest, but for the most part, it's not an issue. Lock them out, it will be fine. So if you're seeing any of the things that I'm seeing in my handstands, here's what I think that you need to do. So the first thing, and I said it about a million times while I was doing the voiceover, I need to push my shoulders tall. And I think that's true for really 90% of people working on their handstands, is really work on pushing tall through your shoulders. I think that some people overrate that and they're like really obsessive about it, but it does help, and it helps your line look a lot better. I know that for me, it's not a mobility issue in terms of my shoulders aren't as open as I'd like them to, but I know that I have that active mobility and I work on it a lot. So it's really just laziness on my part that I'm not pushing tall enough. But if you are seeing it in your practice, do make sure you're doing your mobility work to help open up your shoulders, and obviously just make sure you're pushing tall enough. I mentioned as well that I want to be protracting my shoulder blades more. So if you don't know what that is, protracting is sort of rounding your shoulder forward like that. The scapula comes round instead of retracting, which is pulling back. So I want to be pushed forward, pulled up and elevated, right? And that's going to push me into a much straighter position. Also, I'm not pointing my toes enough. So in summary, if you're me, if your handstand looks like that, push a bit taller through your shoulders. Work on your mobility if it's an issue, and you're going to be looking pretty good. Biggest thing I saw as well that's probably pretty personal to me is that I'm sinking into my left shoulder, and that's making everything shift to my left. And that right now isn't a huge issue, and I hopefully can sort of nip it in the bud and sort it out. But if you ever see anything like that, address it. You know, this shoulder probably is weaker because my right hand's my dominant hand, but it shouldn't be that much weaker. So I'm going to be really conscious moving forward of just pushing tall through my shoulders, and specifically really trying to make sure I'm pushing through my left shoulder. I hope this was interesting for you, and that it was educational maybe to see how I break down my own form and how I sort of critically assess my practice to make sure I'm moving in the right direction. If you're not filming your own training already, start filming it, because you can catch stuff like that you just won't be able to feel. I had no idea I was sinking through my left shoulder, and now I do, and now it's something that I can work on. So film your training, especially if you're really working on fixing up your form. It's different if your goal is just to be able to hold for longer, but if you're working on really trying to improve your form, film and have a look at your form. Because if you don't know what you actually look like when you're in a handstand, then you don't really know where to go from there. Anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a like and maybe subscribe if you want to see more. I've got another video coming up on Wednesday, which is going to be progress from my first week of training towards 20 set. And I'll have another video out on Friday as well. If you want to see my training on a daily basis, I post every day on Instagram at chrisl97. If not, don't worry about it, and I'll see you soon.